At 6 a.m. precisely, demolition begins. Dad confidently briefed the crew. My mother and sister watched, thrilled, as bulldozers formed a line. I walked calmly, extending the paper, my property deed. Sir, stop everything. You're about to level this woman's home. Then, the morning air bit through my thin jacket, each gust carrying the metallic tang of impending destruction. Ahead of me, the yellow machines, monstrous and indifferent, rumbled into position on Grandma Ruth's perfectly manicured lawn, their massive tires carving deep, irreparable tracks into the grass she had tended with such devoted care for decades. My father stood there, gesturing grandly to the foreman, his voice booming as he laid out the demolition plans for the old Victorian house, this home. Mom clutched her purse, her body practically vibrating with an almost feverish anticipation, like a child on Christmas morning, but for something far more sinister. Beside them, my sister Veronica was a statue of smug satisfaction, arms crossed, her eyes glinting behind designer sunglasses, that same expression I'd come to despise, the one she'd worn relentlessly these past 3 months since Grandma died. At first, they didn't even notice me. I'd parked my car deliberately down the street, wanting to observe the tableau of their preparations, to let the sight of their casual cruelty sink in before making my presence known. Each gouge in the earth by those bulldozers felt like a fresh insult, a brutal desecration of Grandma's memory. We're thinking a modern design, Dad announced to the foreman, his voice carrying clearly across the yard, devoid of any remorse. Something that'll really increase the property value. This old place has been an eyesore for years. The foreman nodded, clipboard in hand, a cog in their well-oiled, greedy machine. Veronica pulled out her phone, angling for photos of the house, probably already composing the caption for her social media post. A family triumph, she'd call it, I imagined. Mom adjusted her sunglasses, her gaze sweeping over the property, calculating, measuring every square foot in potential profit. My blood ran cold, a familiar chill settling deep in my bones. I started walking towards them, my footsteps steady against the damp grass, each step deliberate, a rhythm against the frantic beat of my own heart. The folder tucked under my arm felt solid, heavy, a physical manifestation of 3 months of grueling legal battles, countless sleepless nights spent gathering evidence, and one very specific, certified copy of paperwork that I knew, with absolute certainty, would end this grotesque charade. Morning everyone, I called out, my voice cutting through their excited chatter, sharp and clear. Dad's head snapped towards me, a flicker of genuine surprise across his face, quickly followed by a mask of annoyance. Veronica's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a scowl. Mom's expression, in mere seconds, shifted from outright joy to pure, unadulterated irritation. Julia, Dad said slowly, recovering his composure, though I could see the tension in his jaw. What are you doing here? We told you to stay out of family business. Family business? I repeated the phrase, letting it hang in the air, a deliberate calm in my tone as I stopped a few feet from the foreman, who now looked increasingly uncomfortable. Interesting choice of words, considering what you're attempting to destroy. Veronica stepped forward, her designer heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. You need to leave. This property belongs to Mom and Dad now. Grandma's will was clear. Here's the thing about selective memory, especially when money is involved. It's a common psychological phenomenon where individuals conveniently remember details that support their desired outcome, often overlooking or actively suppressing information that contradicts it. My parents, caught in the grip of what they believed was their rightful inheritance, were completely blinded by their own narrative. Was it? I turned my attention to the foreman, who was visibly squirming. Sir, I need you to stop everything immediately. You're about to destroy property that doesn't belong to the people who hired you. He glanced between me and my father, uncertainty etching lines onto his weathered face. Ma'am, I have a contract signed by. I understand what you have, I interrupted gently, already opening my folder. But before you proceed, I think you should see this. I handed him a certified copy of the property deed, freshly updated, legally certified. His eyes widened as he scanned the document, reading Grandma Ruth's signature alongside mine, the date stamp clearly showing 2 years prior, long before her death, long before my parents even knew they'd been written out of her original will. This deed transfers ownership to Julia Margaret Foster upon Ruth Elizabeth Foster's death, the foreman read aloud, his voice now uncertain, laced with a dawning apprehension. He looked at my father, a silent question in his eyes. Sir, this changes everything. I can't demolish a house when ownership is disputed. There's no dispute, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. That deed is legally binding. I've had it verified by 3 separate attorneys. My grandmother transferred this property to me 24 months before she passed away. She knew exactly what she was doing. Dad's face flushed a dark, angry red, the color spreading down his neck. That's impossible. Mother left everything to us in her will. We saw the document ourselves. You saw a will dated 4 years ago, I corrected him, a bitter taste in my mouth. What you didn't know is that Grandma Ruth created a trust 2 years ago, transferring the property outside of probate. The house never entered the estate, which means your will is irrelevant for this particular asset. Mom rushed forward, her voice shrill, a banshee wail. You manipulated an old woman. She was confused. Probably didn't understand what she was signing. Grandma Ruth was sharper than any of us until her final week, I shot back, the words laced with a defiance I hadn't realized I possessed. And she had 3 witnesses present when she signed that deed, including her attorney of 40 years and her physician, both of whom attested to her complete mental competency. Do you really want to challenge their professional assessments in court? The foreman stepped backward, clearly wanting distance from this rapidly escalating confrontation, his crew remaining in their vehicles, watching through windshields as the family drama played out before them. Veronica grabbed for the deed, but I pulled it back smoothly. That's a certified copy, I informed her, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. The original is locked in a safety deposit box at First National Bank, along with video testimony from Grandma Ruth explaining exactly why she made this decision. Video testimony. Dad's voice cracked slightly, the bravado draining from him. What are you talking about? I'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing these words during countless sleepless nights when anger and grief kept me awake. Grandma Ruth recorded a 30-minute statement explaining her reasoning. She detailed every conversation where you pressured her to sell this house. Every time you suggested she move into assisted living so you could access her assets. Every dismissive comment about her being too old to manage her own affairs. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. Even the construction crew seemed to hold their breath, sensing the immense weight of what I'd just revealed. You're lying, Mom hissed, her face contorted. Ruth would never do something like that. We were her favorite children. She only had 2 children, and you were definitely not the favorite. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but God, I didn't regret them. Grandma spent her final years watching you circle like vultures, waiting for her to die so you could sell everything she'd built. Did you think she didn't notice? Did you imagine she was blind to your constant hints about property values and development opportunities? Dad's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his face a mask of barely suppressed rage. We had every right to discuss our mother's estate planning. That's what responsible children do. Responsible children don't ignore their mother's wishes, I countered, my voice low but firm. I turned back to the foreman, striving for a level, professional tone despite the internal earthquake. Sir, if you proceed with this demolition, you'll be destroying private property without owner consent. I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action against your company, and I have documentation proving you were warned before beginning work. The foreman looked at his clipboard, then at my father, then back at the deed in his hands. Years of construction experience had apparently taught him to recognize a legal landmine when he saw one. I'm going to need verification before we continue, he said carefully, pulling out his phone. This is beyond my authority to resolve. I'll have to contact the property lawyer listed on our work order. Good idea, I agreed, a grim satisfaction spreading through me. While you're making calls, you might also want to contact the county clerk's office. They can confirm the deed transfer and the trust documentation. Everything is properly filed and recorded. Veronica's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. Dad, do something. She can't just waltz in here and stop everything. I'm not stopping anything, I corrected, a cold fire in my eyes. I'm preventing the illegal demolition of my property. There's a significant difference. Mom pulled out her own phone, frantically dialing, probably calling their attorney, the one who'd assured them the will was ironclad and Grandma's estate would transfer smoothly. I almost felt sorry for that lawyer, about to receive a very uncomfortable call about documents he'd failed to discover during his estate review. How long have you known? Dad asked quietly, his anger shifting towards something more calculated, more menacing. How long have you been sitting on this information? Since the day Grandma signed the papers, I answered honestly. She called me that afternoon. Told me what she'd done and why. She made me promise not to mention it unless you tried something like this. Something like what? Veronica demanded, her voice shrill again. We're family. We're trying to make good business decisions with inherited property. You're trying to erase Grandma's legacy. I shot back, my voice trembling slightly with the force of my conviction. She built this house with Grandpa Frank 50 years ago. They raised their family here, celebrated holidays here, created memories in every room, and you wanted to bulldoze it all for a quick profit. Veronica scoffed, her perfectly manicured nails catching the morning sunlight. Oh, please spare us the sentimental garbage. That house is falling apart. The foundation needs work. The roof leaks and the electrical system is ancient. We'd be doing everyone a favor by tearing it down. Funny how that foundation seemed sturdy enough when you held your engagement party here 5 years ago, I remarked, a sting in my voice. Or when you borrowed Grandma's dining room for your anniversary dinner last year because the restaurant you wanted was fully booked. The house was good enough when you needed something from it. Mom stepped between us, her voice taking on that condescending, cloying tone I remembered from childhood. Julia, sweetheart, you're being unreasonable. We understand you're emotional about losing Ruth, but you need to accept reality. The property is worth over $1 million. We could split that money, help you with your teaching salary, give you opportunities you'd never have otherwise. I don't want opportunities bought with Grandma's demolished home, I replied steadily, meeting her gaze. And my teaching salary supports me just fine, thank you very much. Dad tried a different approach, his expression shifting to something meant to appear paternal and concerned, but it was just another performance. Think about your future, Julia. What happens when you want to buy your own place? When you want to start a family? This money could change your life. Grandma already changed my life, I said, a deep well of emotions swelling within me. She taught me that some things matter more than money. Apparently, that's a lesson you never learned. This is a classic example of what's known as financial elder abuse, even if not legally prosecuted in this exact scenario. It's not always about outright theft, but often involves subtle, relentless pressure and manipulation designed to gain control over an older person's assets, frequently masked as concern or good advice. The emotional toll on the elder, seeing their wishes disregarded and their financial autonomy undermined by those they should trust, is immense. The foreman was still on his phone, speaking in low tones while watching our family drama unfold, his crew having exited their vehicles now, standing in a loose cluster, trying not to obviously eavesdrop. Veronica pulled up something on her phone, shoving it towards my face. Look at this. I already found a developer who will pay $1.3 million for the lot. Cash offer, closes in 30 days. That's over $400,000 for each of you two. She gestured at our parents, dividing the imaginary spoils. You've already been shopping the property. I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. Grandma's been dead for 3 months, and you're actively negotiating sales behind my back. We're being proactive. Mom defended, her voice sharp. Someone has to think practically about these matters. You're so busy being sentimental that you can't see the smart business decision right in front of you. The smart decision, I repeated slowly, anger building in my chest, a molten core threatening to erupt. Let me tell you about smart decisions. 2 years ago, when Grandma first mentioned she was worried about what would happen to her house, I suggested we all sit down as a family and discuss her wishes. Do you remember what you said, Dad? His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. You said Grandma was getting paranoid in her old age, I continued, my voice steady now, fueled by righteous anger. You told me to stop encouraging her morbid thoughts. Then you turned around and started pressuring her to consider selling while the market was hot. You brought real estate agents to Sunday dinners. You left property valuation reports on her kitchen table. We were helping her understand her options. Dad protested, his voice rising defensively. You were terrorizing her. I countered, the memory of Grandma's tears still raw. She called me crying after you brought that agent to Thanksgiving dinner. Thanksgiving, Dad. You couldn't even give her a holiday without turning it into a sales pitch. Mom's face flushed with indignation. That's a complete exaggeration. We simply mentioned that Margaret's son works in real estate and thought he could provide a free assessment. Ruth completely overreacted. She didn't overreact. I corrected her, my gaze sweeping over them. She finally understood what you really cared about. I turned to Veronica. And you were even worse, bringing your interior designer friends over to comment on how outdated everything was, suggesting Grandma would be so much happier in a modern condo somewhere. You measured rooms for renovation while she was still living there. Veronica had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable, a momentary flicker of shame. I was trying to help her envision possibilities. The place needed updating. The place needed respect, I said firmly, my voice cracking slightly with emotion, which none of you were capable of providing. The foreman finished his call and approached our group cautiously, like someone wading into dangerous, unpredictable waters. Ma'am, he addressed me directly, his tone deferential. My supervisor confirms that we cannot proceed with any demolition until ownership is legally verified through the county. He recommends all parties involved retain legal counsel and resolve this through proper channels. Already done, I assured him, a small, private victory unfolding within me. My attorney has been handling this situation for months. Dad's eyes widened, realization dawning. Months? You've had a lawyer working on this for months. Since 2 weeks after Grandma died, I confirmed, watching his face drain of color. When Veronica let slip at the funeral reception that you were already getting demolition quotes. Remember that, V? You were 3 glasses of wine deep, bragging to Cousin Patricia about your big plans for development. Veronica's face went utterly pale. That was a private conversation. At a funeral reception with 50 people present, I reminded her, a sardonic twist to my lips. Not exactly private, but it confirmed what I'd suspected, that you were already plotting before Grandma was even buried. Mom grabbed Dad's arm, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper that somehow carried through the quiet morning. Gerald, call Stephen right now. We need our lawyer on this immediately. Stephen's on vacation in the Bahamas, Dad muttered, his shoulders slumping. Won't be back for another week. Then call his partner. Call someone. Mom's composure was cracking, her carefully maintained facade showing stress fractures, deep lines forming around her eyes. I pulled additional documents from my folder, holding them where everyone could see. While you're making calls, you should know that I've also filed preliminary paperwork to have this property designated as a historical landmark. The house was built in 1975, making it 50 years old and eligible for protection under the state's Mid-Century Preservation Act. You did what? Dad looked like I'd slapped him. The application is pending review, but once approved, any demolition or substantial alteration would require special permits and historical society approval. Even if you somehow contested the deed successfully, which you won't, you still couldn't tear down the house without committing a criminal offense. Veronica lunged towards me, her designer bag swinging wildly. You vindictive little, careful, I warned, stepping back smoothly, my voice as cold as the morning air. We have witnesses here, and I'm happy to add assault charges to the growing list of reasons you should leave my property. The construction foreman moved between us, his bulk creating an effective barrier. Ladies, I think everyone needs to calm down. Ma'am, he looked at my parents, my crew is leaving now. You'll need to sort this out through legal means. We can't be involved in family disputes. This isn't a dispute. Dad insisted, his voice rising, bordering on hysterical. This is fraud. My daughter is trying to steal her grandmother's property through forged documents and manipulation. Those are serious accusations, I said calmly, my heart thumping a steady rhythm in my chest. Accusations that could constitute slander if you repeat them publicly without evidence. My attorney would be very interested in adding defamation to our list of potential countersuits. Mom pressed her hands to her temples. This is insane. Ruth wouldn't have cut us out of her most valuable asset. She loved us. She did love you, I agreed, and my voice softened despite my anger, a pang of genuine sorrow cutting through me. That's what made your behavior so heartbreaking for her. She wanted you to love her back for who she was, not for what she owned. She kept hoping you'd realize what you were doing, how you were making her feel like a burden instead of a mother. We never made her feel like a burden, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction, the lie obvious even to him. Really? I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a voice memo I'd saved. Grandma started recording conversations in her final year. She wanted documentation, evidence of what was really happening versus what you'd claim later. Would you like to hear the one from last April? The blood drained from Mom's face. That's illegal. Recording people without consent is perfectly legal in this state, as long as one party knows about it, I interrupted, a dark satisfaction blooming within me. Grandma was that party. And before you ask, yes, my attorney has reviewed everything. It's all admissible in court if needed. I pressed play and Grandma Ruth's voice, surprisingly clear, filled the quiet morning air. The recording quality was remarkably good, captured on the small digital recorder I'd helped her learn to use. Ruth, we've discussed this a dozen times. Dad's voice came through next, impatient and dismissive. The house is too much for you to maintain. The property taxes alone are eating up your fixed income. If you sell now, you could move somewhere easier to manage and have money left over for your final years. This is my home, Gerald. Grandma's voice sounded tired, defeated. Frank and I built our life here. You grew up in these rooms. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Of course, it means something, Dad replied, but his tone suggested otherwise. But sentiment doesn't pay bills. Be practical, Mother. You are 84 years old. How much longer do you really think you can handle stairs and yard work? I manage fine, with Julia's help. Julia's enabling your stubbornness. Mom's voice joined the conversation, sharp and critical. She should be encouraging you to make smart decisions instead of clinging to the past. This house is falling apart around you, Ruth. The smart thing would be selling while you still can, before something major breaks and costs a fortune to fix. The roof was replaced 3 years ago, Grandma said quietly. The furnace is only 5 years old. Julia helped me update the plumbing last summer. The house is in excellent condition. For now, Veronica chimed in, her voice dismissive. But at your age, who knows how long you'll be able to maintain it? We're trying to help you plan ahead, Grandma. Why can't you see that? I see that my family wants my house more than they want my happiness. Grandma's voice cracked slightly, a sound that tore at my heart even now. I see that you measure my worth in property values and development potential. That's unfair. Dad protested. We're thinking about your welfare. Are you? Grandma asked, her voice gaining a surprising strength. Or, are you thinking about your inheritance? The recording continued for another minute, documenting more of the same pressure tactics, the same dismissive attitudes, the same relentless focus on money. When I finally stopped playback, nobody spoke. Even the construction crew looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact. There are 17 more recordings, I said into the silence, my voice steady once more. Different dates, different conversations, all following the same pattern. Grandma documented everything because she knew this day would come. She knew you'd challenge her decisions and claim she was incompetent or manipulated. So, she built an airtight case, proving she understood exactly what she was doing and why. Dad's shoulders sagged, some of the fight draining from his posture, leaving him looking smaller, defeated. We weren't trying to hurt her. We genuinely thought she'd be better off in a more manageable situation. You thought you'd be better off with access to her assets? I corrected. There's a difference. And deep down, you know it. Grandma knew it too. That's why she took steps to protect the one thing she valued most. The foreman cleared his throat awkwardly. We're going to head out now. This is way beyond anything my crew should be involved in. He handed my father a business card. When you get legal clearance, if you get legal clearance, you can call to reschedule, but I'll be honest, sir. I don't think that's going to happen. The construction vehicles rumbled to life, backing carefully out of the driveway and down the street. Within minutes, the property was quiet again, except for our family's fractured silence. Veronica sat down on the porch steps, her fight seemingly exhausted, a ghost of her former self. What do you want, Julia? Is this about money? We could arrange a payment, compensate you for giving up your claim. You still don't understand, I said, shaking my head slowly, the weariness settling deep into my bones. This isn't about money. I don't want your compensation. I want Grandma's house to remain standing, to be loved and maintained the way she intended. I want her memory honored instead of demolished for profit. So, we get nothing? Mom's voice was bitter, acrid. Your grandmother's most valuable asset goes entirely to you while we're supposed to just accept it? You'll get everything else, I reminded them. Her savings, her investment accounts, her personal belongings, except for what she specifically left to me. That's still substantial. But yes, the house is mine, and it's staying mine. Dad pulled out his own phone, scrolling through contacts. I'm calling our lawyer anyway. Steven, vacation or not, his firm needs to handle this. Call whoever you want, I said, my voice holding a note of caution. But before you spend thousands on legal fees fighting a battle you'll lose, maybe consider what Grandma would think of that choice. More money wasted on trying to override her wishes instead of accepting them. Don't lecture us about what Mother would want. Dad snapped, his anger flaring again. You're not the authority on her thoughts and feelings. Actually, I am. I pulled out one more document, this one a letter in Grandma's own elegant handwriting. She wrote this specifically for today, for this moment. She predicted you'd show up with bulldozers, and she wanted you to understand why she made her choice. Mom stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the letter with something resembling dread, a dawning horror. When did she write that? 6 months before she died, I answered. She was clear-minded, healthy, and absolutely certain about her decision. She sealed it in an envelope with instructions for me to open it only if you attempted demolition. Veronica stood up from the porch steps, brushing dirt from her expensive pants, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. This is all very dramatic, Julia, but you're not painting an accurate picture. We weren't monsters. We visited Grandma regularly. Regularly, I repeated, letting the word hang heavy between us. Twice a month for an hour counts as regular to you. I was here 3 afternoons every week. I knew what medications she took, what time she liked her tea, which television show she never missed. Can any of you tell me what her favorite book was? Silence greeted my question, heavy and damning. It was To Kill a Mockingbird, I continued, a raw edge to my voice. She reread it every spring. Can you name her best friend from the neighborhood? More silence. Dorothy Chin, who lived 2 streets over. They had coffee together every Tuesday morning for 23 years. Grandma attended Dorothy's funeral last year. And not one of you came with her to support her through losing her closest friend. I felt my voice getting stronger, years of suppressed frustration finally finding release. You didn't know her daily life because you never bothered to be part of it. Dad's face darkened. We had our own lives to manage, Julia. Jobs, responsibilities, commitments. Not everyone has summers off like teachers do. Don't you dare, I warned, my anger flashing hot, my body trembling. I spent my summers helping Grandma with projects you promised to handle and never did. That roof replacement you said you'd coordinate? I found the contractors, got the quotes, supervised the work. The garden renovation you claimed you'd help with? I spent 2 months working alongside her, planting and weeding. Every promise you made and broke, I picked up the pieces. Mom's expression shifted to something defensive, a desperate attempt to justify their neglect. We offered to hire people to help her. Professional services that would have done everything properly. She didn't want strangers in her home doing work her family should have cared enough to help with. I shot back, my voice vibrating with emotion. She wanted connection, not transactions. But you couldn't understand that because you measure everything in dollars and convenience. Veronica pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes, though I saw no actual tears. You're making us sound heartless, and that's not fair. We loved Grandma. Did you? I challenged, my gaze unwavering. Or did you love what she represented? The inheritance waiting in the wings, the property value that increased every year, the financial security her death would provide? Because from where I stood, your love looked suspiciously like an investment strategy. That's enough, Dad said sharply, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. You're crossing a line. I crossed the line? I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears, a harsh, brittle sound. You showed up here at 6 o'clock in the morning with demolition equipment, ready to destroy a home where your mother lived for 50 years, and I'm the one crossing lines? The foreman, who'd been maintaining a respectful distance during our family implosion, shifted uncomfortably. His crew had retreated to their trucks, clearly wanting no part of this confrontation. Mom tried a different approach, her voice softening into the manipulative sweetness I recognized from childhood negotiations. Julia, honey, I know you're upset. Grief makes people act in ways they normally wouldn't, but you need to think clearly about this situation. Maintaining this house will be expensive. Property taxes, insurance, utilities, repairs. It's a massive financial burden for someone on a teacher's income. I've already calculated the costs, I informed her coolly, a shield against her false concern. Grandma left me a detailed budget showing all expenses. She also left a separate fund specifically designated for house maintenance. Everything's planned for, accounted for, and fully funded for the next 10 years minimum. Dad's eyes narrowed, a glint of predatory interest. How much money are we talking about? That's none of your business, I replied, my voice steady. The maintenance fund exists outside the estate. It's not part of your inheritance calculation. Veronica stepped forward aggressively, her face tight with renewed anger. Of course it is. Any money Mother had should be divided equally among her heirs. You can't just hide assets in separate accounts. I'm not hiding anything, I said calmly. Grandma established a home maintenance trust 2 years ago, completely separate from her estate. It was legally created, properly documented, and specifically excluded from probate. My attorney verified everything months ago. Your attorney? Mom spat the words like they tasted bad. How are you even affording an attorney? Legal representation costs thousands of dollars. I smiled slightly, a genuine, if weary, smile. Grandma arranged that too. She retained Richard Chin on a prepaid basis specifically to handle any challenges to her property transfer. He's already been compensated for his work, which means I can fight your legal challenges indefinitely without spending a cent. The information hit them like physical blows. I watched realization dawn across 3 faces simultaneously. Grandma Ruth had anticipated every move, blocked every strategy, prepared for every objection. She built a fortress around her wishes that they couldn't breach, no matter how hard they tried. This meticulous planning by Grandma Ruth is a testament to the power of proactive legal and financial safeguarding, particularly in anticipation of familial conflict. It highlights the importance of comprehensive estate planning, including living trusts and detailed directives, to ensure one's final wishes are honored and vulnerable assets protected from those with potentially exploitative intentions. Furthermore, her foresight in documenting their manipulative behavior speaks to a deep understanding of human nature and the need for irrefutable evidence when facing ingrained denial. She really thought of everything, Veronica whispered, sinking back onto the porch steps, her spirit utterly deflated. She spent 2 years planning, I confirmed, my gaze sweeping over their defeated faces. 2 years watching your behavior, documenting your priorities, and making absolutely certain her home would be protected after her death. She consulted estate lawyers, property attorneys, and financial advisors. She left nothing to chance. Dad's phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. He answered it, walking a few steps away for privacy. I heard fragments of his conversation. Stephen's partner. Emergency consultation. Property dispute. When he returned, his expression had shifted from angry to coldly calculating, a familiar mask I'd seen too many times. Our attorney says we have grounds to contest based on undue influence, he announced, his voice regaining some of its earlier bluster. If we can prove you manipulated Mother during a period of diminished capacity, the property transfer becomes voidable. Good luck with that, I said, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping my lips. Grandma had cognitive assessments from 3 different physicians, confirming her mental competency at the time of transfer. She also underwent a psychiatric evaluation specifically to preempt that exact challenge. Dr. Patricia Hammond, Dr. Elizabeth Winters, and Dr. Franklin Shaw all documented her complete understanding of her decisions and the legal implications. Mom's face went pale. 3 doctors? Why would she need 3 doctors to confirm something that should be obvious? Because she knew you'd try anything to get this property, I explained, the words feeling like a final, definitive blow. She predicted you'd claim incompetence, coercion, manipulation, whatever legal theory might cast doubt on her choices. So she built an evidence mountain that no court would ignore. I unfolded the letter, its crisp paper a stark contrast to the unfolding drama, and began to read aloud. My dearest Gerald, Evelyn, and Veronica. If you're hearing these words, it means you've attempted to demolish my home despite Julia's rightful ownership. I hoped it wouldn't come to this. Hoped you'd respect my final wishes. But I know my children better than they think I do. You see opportunity where you should see legacy. You see profit where you should see memory. This house is more than real estate. It's the physical embodiment of 50 years of love, laughter, family, and life. Your father and I chose every fixture, painted every wall, planted every tree in the yard. Julia understands that. She values what we built, not what it's worth. That's why she's the right person to inherit this place. I don't hate you for wanting money. I understand that security matters, but I needed to know someone would preserve what Frank and I created. And Julia is that someone. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Accept my choice with grace and dignity. Let the house stand. Let Julia honor our family's history the way it deserves, with love and disappointment, Ruth. The silence after I finished reading felt crushing, absolute. Mom wiped at her eyes, though whether from sadness or anger, I couldn't tell. Dad stared at the house like he was truly seeing it for the first time, its weathered charm suddenly a testament to something more profound than mere market value. Veronica remained on the steps, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking faintly. She thought we'd do this, Veronica said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. She predicted it exactly. Because she knew you, I said gently, the anger in me replaced by a profound sadness. She hoped she was wrong, but she knew. The foreman, who had retreated to his truck, now approached cautiously. My supervisor says we're shutting down operations until ownership is legally confirmed, ma'am. He nodded towards me. You'll need to provide copies of your documentation to our legal department. I have everything prepared, I assured him, pulling business cards from my folder. This is my attorney's information. He's expecting your call and has complete copies of all relevant documents ready for your review. The foreman signaled his crew, making cutting gestures across his throat. Engines shut off one by one, leaving a sudden, profound quiet across the property. Birds, previously silenced by the rumble, started singing again, their voices filling the space where diesel engines had roared. Dad stared at the now silent bulldozers, his expression unreadable, a complex tapestry of defeat and dawning understanding. You thought of everything, haven't you? Grandma thought of everything, I corrected, my voice soft. I just followed her instructions. She knew you'd try this eventually. She predicted you'd wait until after her funeral. Give yourselves a few weeks to seem respectful, then move fast before anyone could object. That's not Mom started, but I cut her off. She wrote it all down. Dated entries in her journal describing conversations where you discussed demolition plans, where you calculated lot value, where you debated whether the historical designation would complicate quick sales. She documented everything. Veronica's phone slipped from her hands, landing in the grass with a soft thud. Grandma kept journals for 60 years, I confirmed, beautiful leather-bound books filled with her thoughts, observations, and detailed accounts of family interactions. She left them all to me, along with explicit permission to use them as evidence if needed. The construction crew began packing equipment, clearly relieved to escape the family drama. Their foreman handed back my deed carefully, as though afraid it might explode if mishandled. "We'll be in touch once legal issues are resolved," he said, already walking toward his truck. "Have your attorney contact our office." Within 10 minutes, the yard was empty of machinery. Deep tire tracks remained in the lawn, stark evidence of how close they'd come to destroying everything. I stood in the sudden quiet, facing 3 family members who now looked like strangers. "What happens now?" Dad asked finally, his voice stripped of its earlier confidence, a raw vulnerability in his tone. "Now I move into my house," I said simply, a profound sense of peace settling over me. "I'll renovate it according to Grandma's wishes, preserving the original character while updating the infrastructure." She left detailed plans, actually, sketches of what she imagined the place could become. "You're going to live here?" Mom sounded horrified. "In this old dump?" "This home," I emphasized the word, "represents 5 decades of love and family history. Just because you can't see value beyond dollar signs doesn't mean it's worthless." Veronica retrieved her phone from the grass, smudging dirt across its screen. "What about the rest of the estate? Are you claiming everything?" "I'm claiming what Grandma Ruth explicitly left to me," I answered. "The house, the property it sits on, and her personal effects. The rest of the estate, her financial accounts, investments, and other assets, those follow the will you're so familiar with. You'll still inherit plenty." Dad's eyes narrowed, a flicker of the old calculation returning. "But you get the property, the single most valuable piece of her estate." "I get the home she wanted preserved," I corrected. "And yes, it happens to be valuable." She understood that when she made her decision. She also understood that you'd never maintain it, never honor what it represented. You'd see potential profit and nothing else. Mom straightened her shoulders, attempting to regain some dignity. "We could contest this. Fight the transfer in court." "You could try," I agreed, a subtle warning in my voice. "My attorney estimates that legal battle would cost you about $200,000, take approximately 18 months, and you'd lose. Grandma's documentation is bulletproof. But if you want to spend your inheritance on lawyer fees, that's certainly your choice." The threat hung in the air between us. I could see them calculating, weighing costs against potential gains, trying to determine if pride was worth the financial risk. "Why did she do this?" Dad asked, and for the first time that morning, he sounded genuinely hurt rather than angry, the facade finally cracking. "I'm her son. We took care of her." "Did you?" I kept my voice gentle, remembering Grandma's tears when she'd first told me about their pressure tactics. "You visited twice a month, stayed for an hour, spent most of that time discussing her finances. You called once a week, conversations that lasted maybe 10 minutes. Meanwhile, you made it clear she was a burden, someone whose continued independence inconvenienced your plans." "That's not fair." Veronica protested, her voice strained. "We were concerned about her safety." "You were concerned about her assets," I countered, the truth hanging heavy between us. "There's a difference, and Grandma was smart enough to recognize it." I visited 3 times a week. I called every evening. I took her to doctor appointments, helped with grocery shopping, spent hours listening to her stories. Not because I wanted her money, but because I loved her company. Dad looked toward the house, his expression complicated, a mixture of regret and something akin to shame. "She talked about you constantly." "Julia did this." "Julia said that." "We thought she was just being sentimental." "She was recognizing the difference between genuine care and calculated interest," I said quietly, the words echoing in the sudden silence. "I'm sorry you can't see that distinction." Mom gathered her purse, clearly ready to leave, her defeat palpable. "Come on, Gerald. We're not wanted here." "You were wanted," I told them, meaning it, a raw honesty in my voice. "Grandma hoped until the end that you'd change, that you'd start valuing her for who she was rather than what she owned. She gave you chances, documented every opportunity you missed, but you were too focused on future profits to appreciate present relationships." Veronica headed toward their car without another word, her shoulders slumped. Mom followed, her heels clicking sharply against the driveway. Dad lingered, studying the house like he was seeing it for the first time. "She really recorded everything?" he asked, his voice low. "Everything," I confirmed. There's a video of her explaining her decision, shot by a professional videographer with her attorney present. She's clear, articulate, and absolutely certain about her choices. Watching it breaks my heart, but it also makes me proud of her courage. Can I see it? The question surprised me. The video, I mean. I'd like to hear what she said. I considered his request carefully. Maybe someday. After you've had time to process this. After you've done some genuine reflection about your relationship with her. Right now, I think it would just make you angry. He nodded slowly, accepting the boundary I'd drawn. You're probably right. He paused, seeming to gather courage. Was she happy at the end? I mean, was she at peace? The question felt sincere, and I answered honestly. She died knowing someone would preserve what she'd built. Yes, she was at peace. Dad walked toward the car where Mom and Veronica waited impatiently. Halfway there, he turned back, a strange, almost wistful expression on his face. For what it's worth, I think she chose correctly. You'll take care of this place properly. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I watched their car disappear down the street, leaving me alone with the house and my thoughts, the lingering scent of damp earth and diesel fumes slowly giving way to the faint, sweet smell of spring flowers. The Victorian stood exactly as it had for 5 decades, its wraparound porch slightly weathered, its painted trim needing touch-ups, its windows reflecting the morning sunlight in patterns Grandma had loved. I climbed the front steps slowly, running my hand along the familiar railing that would smooth and cool beneath my fingertips. Inside, everything remained untouched since her death. The furniture she'd carefully selected over the years, the photographs documenting our family history, the grand piano she played every evening. I sat on her favorite chair, the one positioned to catch the afternoon light through the bay windows, and let the quiet embrace me. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney, heard from the construction company. They formally withdrew from the contract and issued refunds to your parents. Your father's attorney called requesting copies of all documentation, sending everything over this afternoon. You did it. No, we did it. Grandma Ruth had done it, really, with her careful planning and detailed documentation. But together, we protected something truly valuable, something that measured worth in memories rather than market prices. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and whispers, a living entity. I'd spent countless afternoons here as a child, learning to bake in Grandma's kitchen, reading in her library, listening to stories about her own childhood in this same space. Now those rooms were mine to preserve, mine to maintain, mine to eventually pass along to someone who would understand their true value. My parents would receive their inheritance, enough money to fund comfortable retirements. Veronica would get her share, probably spending it on things that depreciated rapidly. They'd move on, finding new investments and opportunities to pursue. But I'd have this. Grandma Ruth's legacy, her history, her home. Every morning, I'd wake up in rooms she'd loved, walk on floors she'd polished, look through windows she'd gazed through while dreaming about her family's future. The demolition that almost happened would become a family legend, a story about boundaries and consequences. Perhaps someday, Dad would watch Grandma's video testimony and truly understand what he'd lost. Perhaps Mom and Veronica would realize that relationships matter more than real estate values. Or perhaps they wouldn't. Some people never learn to see beyond profit margins and property assessments. But that was their loss, not mine. I stood up, heading toward the kitchen to make tea using Grandma's favorite kettle, its familiar weight comforting in my hand. The house needed work. Updated electrical, modern plumbing, fresh paint throughout. But I'd take my time, doing the renovations thoughtfully, honoring what existed while carefully introducing improvements. Outside, the torn lawn would need repair. I'd plant new grass over those bulldozer tracks, erasing the physical evidence of the destruction that had almost occurred. By summer, the yard would be perfect again, ready for the garden Grandma had always envisioned expanding. This was my inheritance, not just a house, but a profound responsibility for preserving the love that had shaped these walls. Every decision I made would honor her memory, protect her legacy, and ensure that future generations understood what she valued most. The bulldozers were gone. The threat had passed. But it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? When faced with the choice between generational wealth and emotional connection, between profit and preservation, what truly defines a family's legacy, and which path would you choose?